Actually, as far as you remember that we started with the financial statement analysis. Before that, we took an introduction of financial management, what are different aspects in it, especially the investing and financing, as well as the operations management point of view. And with that, we started analysis of financial statements, where we saw that how companies actually see the ratios analysis as a tool of financial planning. Or after that, we went into discussion of the cash flow analysis, how to prepare cash budgets and sales forecasting, and based upon that sales forecasting, how to forecast the future financial statements. Walaikum salam. Alhamdulillah. So we actually went for that. Those things were discussed, and as you know, in the previous chapter, we studied about the working capital management, and we also discussed that the working capital management basically means that the management of current assets. The current assets management, now we're gonna extend into multiple different types of current assets. For example, first we discussed about cash, how to prepare the cash budget, how to analyze the credit sales as well as the cash sales that we are forecasting, and what impact they will have on the cash budget in the future. And next week in this chapter, in chapter number 9, we're gonna discuss about the marketable securities and some of the cash analysis. But again, we're gonna see that how to hold cash in a particular organization, how organizations see cash as an asset as well as an investment. Because when you have a lot of free cash flow at your hand, what different type of activities you're interested to get into, and also how to manage it over the longer run. Of course, when you have excess cash, how to invest that particular asset into marketable securities. That is also that something we're gonna look into. So, although we discussed these objectives before in the previous class, but let me uh, remind you about what we're gonna study here. First of all, what are different types of motives that a company has to hold cash? Now, those can be investing motives, those can be speculative motives. So depending upon the type of organization, what kind of business they are in, they can have a varying motive as compared to other organizations. So what different broad motives are there that we're going to study in this chapter? We will also see that how we can efficiently manage cash as an asset. We can efficiently take care of it. We can predict that how much cash is coming, and how we actually deal with the extra cash we have, or sometimes when we don't have cash, how we can finance that particular gap. Then we will see that what are different methods of speeding up the cash collection, because most of the organization, when they do business on an expanded level, they have to get engaged into credit management. Of course, you are doing credit sales, and receivables get generated from those credit sales. How actually do you deal with those credit sales? How are you going to receive those receivables? Of course, you're going to first of all make a maturity plan, that how many receivables are to be received within a particular operating cycle, and how many will take more time, how many bad debts will occur, what would be the allowance that you will put aside for the bad debts, and if you want to speed up that process, how that process can be speeded up. So there are some strategies that we're going to discuss in this chapter. Now, because in the modern days, a lot of banks, they are also using electronic services, especially electronic data interchanges. So a lot of things are basically easier nowadays, that businesses can hire an outsourcing program where they can ask somebody to help them in collection of their receipts. This is mostly valid for businesses that are working on multinational level. It's not usually very beneficial for a small and medium enterprise, because it sometimes may cost you a lot of money, because the recovery of money itself, the recovery of cash itself is not that much. So it depends at how much cash you have to extract from your receivables, and depending on that, you make these kind of expenses. Then number 6, you can see that we will identify the key variables that we need to consider while purchasing marketable securities. Being a financial manager, you should always be at the look of how many lucrative securities are available in the market, how we can put extra cash into those kind of assets which can provide you more profit and more cash. And of course, there are a number of securities, including both equity securities as well as debt instruments that you can put your money in. So, how you can create a portfolio that can provide you a better return, and that portfolio management is basically a part that we will discuss in point number 7. Finally, in point number 8, we will describe the 3 different segments of marketable security portfolios that can be approached and that can be put into the portfolio of an organization to manage the cash. So these are some of the broad objectives that we're going to cover. Now we will talk about how to analyze the motives of cash holding and how to speed up the recovery of cash, and also how to slow down the payments that you're going to make. What are different kind of strategies out there? Right. So broadly, there are 3 motives that any organization can rather have to put their cash in. First of all, you can have a transactions motive, which is usually a part of every organization, that you have to meet certain payments, because while you're purchasing your raw material, or maybe you're investing into your current assets, maybe you're also investing into salaries and wages. So all these expenses that you have to incur in a particular operating cycle would require a lot of cash. So that is the transaction motive, and mostly most of the organizations, they actually engage in these kind of transactions. They need cash for these transactions. But some organizations go a step ahead. They have even speculative motives. And by speculative motives is that how you scan the external environment and put your money into lucrative opportunities. Holding extra cash means that you're holding money for no reason. So why not invest it? Because being a business, your ultimate objective is to earn profit and share it with the owners of the organization. So if you have additional cash and you want to invest it, being a speculative move, you can look into stock market or even bitcoins. Nowadays, cryptocurrencies are there. There are corporate bonds as well as treasury bonds. So depending upon your risk tolerance, again, I will repeat this point that it always depends upon the risk tolerance of the organization. There are organizations who are not able to take that much risk because they cannot get engaged into speculative transactions very early in their age. But there are other organizations that can do that. For example, financial institutions, they get involved in speculative transactions all the time. They invest in options and swaps and futures, which are speculative securities, as well as they create their own securities. So there are businesses who use their cash to get involved into speculative motives as well. Then finally, you have precautionary motives. You want to have a cushion, a buffer that can provide you a safety zone for future, uh, especially for your operations in the business operations. If you sometimes feel that in future you will need cash to purchase some more inventory, or maybe to pay your employees, or maybe for a pay raise, so you can keep a reservoir of the cash, so you can eventually put that cash into action whenever you need. So these are 3 broad areas where cash holdings can help an organization. It all depends upon the type of organization, because if you're a service oriented business, you don't have to purchase much of an inventory. Most of the time, you're running your business with supplies. And if you're a trading organization, of course, all the business is dependent upon inventory, because you will purchase products to sell them, resell them, right? And if you're a manufacturing concern, again, then you will have to purchase the raw material and types of raw material. Sometimes it's the raw material in the very raw form. Sometimes it's the work in process that will require you to put some cash into convert that raw material into finished goods. and then the warehousing costs and all that. So depending upon the type of organization, the operating cycle can vary. It can be different for different organizations. So the operating cycle is basically starting from your purchases, where you actually purchase the supplies and raw materials, and you have to pay cash for that. And then you resell the products you manufacture, you sell them, or maybe you provide services. And with those, you create account receivables. And from those account receivables, you collect money. Now, the money that you collect can go into different disbursements. For example, you have employees to pay for, you have taxation authorities, you can have your operating expenses like your bills, utility bills, and all that. With that, you might get exhausted with the cash. You don't have any more cash to pay anybody. You might need some short term financing, and you can take a line of credit from the bank. You can go for short term financing for issuing short term bonds as well. But if you have excess cash, if you have covered all the expenses and you still are left with a lot of cash, then you can invest this cash into marketable securities, securities that are available to be traded frequently in the market. Like you can invest in shares, you can invest in the corporate bonds of other companies, and you can also invest in the short term saving schemes that can help you to sustain that amount of cash as well as give you some return in the shorter run. So this is the cash management system that a company can implement. Of course, again, it depends that what kind of business you are in and how much cash savings you have. If you don't have any cash savings, this would not be your particular concern. Your concern would be to how to actually speed up the recovery of cash and how to slow down the payments that you're making. Okay, so receivables, depending upon your business scale and type, you will engage into credit sales, and those credit sales will create account receivables, and then those receivables will be maturing in the form of cash collections. How can you expect those, and how can you expedite those? So first of all, the preparation of invoices and mailing them is a big issue in multinational corporations, because most of the multinational corporations, they do not deal in cash. They have to keep the record of every transaction. They have a control system in place. So what they do, they create invoices, and those invoices are including all the details of those transactions. So first thing that you can do to speed up the recovery of cash is that you can create the invoice early, and you can mail it in a proper time, so the customer has enough time to not only acknowledge the receipt of that particular invoice, but also can manage the cash and send it to your bank account. So what happens in these companies? Okay, why I'm shifting to companies right away? Because small and medium organizations, they mostly work in cash. And even if they're not working in cash, their account receivables are not that much. And they are directly in communication with those debtors who have to pay them money. It's most tricky with the companies who are multinational and they have a lot of account receivables tied up in their balance sheet, and they have to convert them into cash. So these are the companies that we need to be concerned about. Now, their concern is to reach these customers in timely manner. And then they also have a particular management system with information system with banks. Banks have a separate checkers box where they receive the invoices and all the cash or check payments from a particular company in a single box. So at the end of the day, a clerk from the bank goes to that box and collect all the checks for that company. So that system can be put into place for collection of cash. So when we talk about issuing of an invoice and putting it into the mail, the time it takes from issuing of the invoice to the recovery of money is basically what we call the mail float. And the mail float also include the processing as well as the availability float. The processing float is that the processing which happens between you mail the invoice and the actual payment that you receive. Because when the check goes to the bank has to match that check with the invoice, also has to process it. And most of the time, you see when you deposit a check in the bank, it goes into clearance. And once it is cleared, only then you can receive the payment. So that clearance time and that processing time is what we call processing float. And finally, you have availability float. Availability float is the time when you have that cash available in your bank account and you have not yet utilized it. So these three floats are the time period that can be included between the issuing of an invoice and the receipt of basically the payment that you are looking forward. Okay, so these three are explained in the following slides. Right, so again, a lot of companies, what they're doing these days are they're using electronic services to create billing systems. For example, if you go on dras.pk and when you purchase a product, you go into the checkout and you create your own invoice by yourself, just clicking a few buttons, putting in your information. The invoice is automatically created for you because that system is inbuilt into that application. So a lot of companies are using these inbuilt billing systems to have an earlier billing. These are computerized, as well as the invoices are shipped automatically because the companies that ship your invoices are also attached with that information system. And also the payment request, they are also automatically generated. And sometimes you have pre-authorized debts. We don't have that much pre-authorized debts in Pakistan, but what happens in Western countries is that if you have to pay your bill monthly to a company like WAPDA or maybe Sui Northern Gas Company, because you have to pay the bill monthly. So what you can do, you can direct your bank to pay that amount of bill monthly automatically from your account to the particular corporation. So the amount gets deducted from your account automatically because you have authorized that debit pre to that post. So that is pre-authorization of a debit. Okay, so not a lot of things related to small and medium organizations. Mostly major corporations, they get attached into these kind of facilities, and they can also have a lockbox facility from a bank. Now, what is a lockbox facility? When you deal with a particular bank for a longer time, and the bank is very concerned about you because you're their major customer, you put a lot of cash into their deposits, and they are going to help you in collection of your receivables. They create a lockbox for you. What is a lockbox? Lockbox is a box where all the checks and invoices from your customers get received. Now your company will have a separate lockbox. Initially, they started with the conventional lockbox. They had a particular box placed in the bank where the customers would come and they will place the check that relates to your company, only your company. So every organization the bank is dealing with will have a different lockbox. So at the end of the day, a clerk will go to that lockbox and take out all the checks from there and process them quickly. So no time is wasted in the clearance and all that. Nowadays, because things are getting electronics and e-commerce is in place, now banks have electronic lock boxes where customers can push those payments into those electrical wallets of the bank. They can make transactions electronically, and the cash which comes to that lockbox is directly transferred to your account, the account which is related to your corporation, your company. So this is the lockbox process, that the mail is received by the bank on your behalf, the checks and the invoices are received by the bank on your behalf, and then the bank actually credit all those receipts and payments into your account by making the process rapid and prompt for you. There are advantages of this because this way you won't spend a lot of time on invoicing, on invoice float and then mail float and then clearance float. That float timing will be reduced a lot. But there is also disadvantage because if you're not a bigger company, the cost that you have to pay to the bank may be significant and may add to your major expenses, and that can reduce your profitability. So this is a trade-off that a corporation will have to take on and analyze, that how much money I will have to put in for this service. So if you believe that it's not that costly, it's not that expensive. You will right away go into purchasing these kind of services. But again, if you are small and medium corporation and you don't have that much cash available for these services, this can be a major disadvantage for you to hire a bank for this. With that, we also have concentration banking. Sometimes we keep our payment accounts and the concentration accounts separate. That's what makes the name concentration banking, that you keep your lockbox different from the boxes where you deposit your accounts, where you deposit your money, because you don't want to put every transaction into action. Sometimes you want some creditors to wait for the payment. So sometimes you will direct your bank to actually move the cash from the lockbox to a particular accounts in a particular way. So there are some accounts that will be concentrated with the payment right away, and some will be given a particular instruction that they will need an authorization from the organization before they can move the cash to those wallets. Okay, so of course, companies, when they have to pay the salaries and wages, they put those into different accounts that can provide a particular, for example, if you have to pay the salaries on every 5th of month, so before 5th, you will create an account where you move the amount of salaries that you have to pay. So that account is only created for that particular transaction, right? So these are the things that can be a part of the concentration as well as compensation banking. All right. So also there are account receivable conversions, which is a process by which you actually use your paper checks. You convert them into different collection sites because you have different customers in different areas. So you can produce different kind of recovery services that can help you to deal with a particular area. And this is geographical area, which I'm talking about. So these are different strategies that you can have to get engaged into recovering the receivables in a very promptly manner. Again, one thing that we previously discussed in class is that in America, after 9/11, what happened that all the banking system was down because the air air travel was banned for a couple of days. The checks were not moving in the mail, and a lot of banking activity was halted. So what they came up was a particular system that can work electronically, and it was called the 21st Century Act. And it is also called Check 21, where you only have to scan the check and send it to the bank. You don't need to have to send the physical check. You only send the scanned copy and the bank processes on your behalf. Of course, they ask you for authorization through email or maybe a passcode, something like that. But after you have authorized that, the checks get processed electronically. This is a substitute for the conventional banking that we have. Okay, so these are different receipt protocols that you can place in order to receive the money in a promptly manner. Now, before I move into the payment section, I would like you guys to actually ask me questions that you want to ask about the receipt processes. So let me turn on the microphones for you guys so you can ask questions. All right, guys, you can ask questions now. Any question?
No, sir.
G. Any questions so far?
No, sir.
No? Okay, then what I will require is a brief revision from you that what we have discussed so far. Why not you give me the major points that we have discussed if you don't have any questions? कौन briefly explain करेगा जी क्या discuss किया अभी तक हमने? नो वन?
सर हमने अभी तक कैश कलेक्शन मेथड्स डिस्कस किए हैं। सर लॉक बॉक्सेस वगैरह हमने डिस्कस किए हैं 2 तरह के।
ठीक है।
और उसके बाद सर हमने अभी जो डिस्कस किया सर दिमाग से एग्जैक्ट टर्म निकल गई।
Okay. So I can ask you guys questions and you can answer those questions in order to revise this. So let me ask you this कि अगर आप एक ऐसी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है जो कि क्रेडिट पे सेल्स करते हैं और आपकी एक वेबसाइट है जहाँ पे ज़्यादातर परचेजेस होती हैं और आप अपनी रिकवरी को स्पीड अप करना चाहते हैं, तो क्या डिफरेंट मेथड्स यूज़ कर सकते हैं आप उस रिकवरी को स्पीड अप करने के लिए? क्यों हमाद याकूब आप आंसर कर सकते हैं? हमाद या इम्तियाज अली या हुमायूं?
यस सर।
जो क्वेश्चन मैंने पूछा है उसका आंसर दे सकते हैं आप?
सर डिस्काउंट आएगा सर इसमें अगर हम डेली वो कर दें कि आप अगर 15 डेज में अगर पे करेंगे तो हम जो है वो आपको इतने % जो है वो ऑफ करेंगे, इसमें आ सकता है सर?
बिल्कुल आ सकता है अब्दुल्ला, दैट्स व्हाट वी कॉल क्रेडिट टर्म्स।
ओके सर।
क्रेडिट टर्म से मुराद ये होती है कि जो आपके कस्टमर्स हैं उनसे अर्ली कैश रिकवर करने के लिए आप एक लीनियंट क्रेडिट टर्म्स जो है वो इंगेज कर सकते हैं। जैसे आप कह सकते हैं कि अगर आप हमारे अच्छे कस्टमर हैं, 10 दिन के अंदर अंदर पैसे देंगे तो हम आपको 2% डिस्काउंट ऑफर करेंगे। आफ्टर 10 डेज आपको वो डिस्काउंट जो है वो अवेलेबल नहीं होगी। तो ये डिस्काउंट्स जो हैं, इस तरह की क्रेडिट टर्म्स जो हैं, बिल्कुल इंगेज कर सकते हैं आप ऐसे कस्टमर से जल्दी पैसे रिसीव करने के लिए। इट ऑल डिपेंड्स कि क्या आप वो डिस्काउंट ऑफर कर सकते हैं या नहीं कर सकते। दूसरी बात ये होती है कि आपको एक ऐसा इंफॉर्मेशन सिस्टम मैनेज करना होता है जिसमें आप ये भी पता कर सकें कि आपके बैड बैड डेट्स जो हैं वो कितने ज़्यादा क्रिएट होते हैं। अगर तो आपके बैड डेट्स फॉर एग्जांपल 20% है आपकी सेल्स के, तो आपने ये देखना है कि कौन से ऐसे कस्टमर्स हैं जो कि आपके बैड डेट्स में जाते हैं और कितने दिनों के बाद वो पेमेंट आपके लिए बैड डेट बन जाती है। तो कंपनीज क्या करती हैं कि वो अपने रिसीवेबल्स के स्केजुअल्स क्रिएट करती हैं। यू हैव अ स्केजुअल ऑफ 30 डेज कि इन कस्टमर से आपने अगले 30 दिन में पैसे रिसीव करने। यू हैव स्केजुअल ऑफ 60 डेज एंड 90 डेज, एंड बियॉन्ड दैट इट इज कंसिडर्ड कि आपका बैड डेट है, 90 डेज के बाद आपको कोई पैसे नहीं देगा या फिर रिकवरी जो है दैट वुड बी वेरी कॉस्टली एंड वेरी अनलाइकली। तो बेसिकली जो आपके अकाउंट रिसीवेबल्स हैं उनकी ये स्केजुलिंग करना, उनको टाइमली इनवॉइसेस सेंड करना, रिमाइंडर सेंड करना, फिर इवेंचुअली उनसे पैसे जो है टाइमली रिसीव करना अपने बैंक अकाउंट के साथ, उसकी रिकन्सिलिएशन करना, ये डेली बेसिस पे ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस में चल रहा होता है। माय क्वेश्चन वाज देयर इज एन ई कॉमर्स बिजनेस और उस ई कॉमर्स बिजनेस के लिए एक कैश रिसीट को स्पीड अप करने के लिए क्या स्ट्रैटेजीज हो सकती हैं। तो एक तो हमने ये डिस्कस की क्योंकि वो इलेक्ट्रॉनिक सर्विसेज प्रोवाइड कर रहा है, तो जिस पॉइंट पे वो सर्विस प्रोवाइड कर रहा है, जैसे अगर वेबसाइट है, क्योंकि आप वेबसाइट पे सर्विस प्रोवाइड कर रहे हैं, तो अगर आपकी सेल परचेज वेबसाइट पे हो रही है तो आप क्यों ना अपना पेमेंट पॉइंट भी वहीं पे क्रिएट करें। दैट राइट आफ्टर द कस्टमर हैज परचेज्ड अ प्रोडक्ट, यू पुट द कस्टमर इनटू अ चेकआउट और उस चेकआउट पे वो कस्टमर अपनी डिटेल्स पुट करे, जिससे एक ऑटोमेटिकली इनवॉइस जनरेट हो और उसको आप डेली बेसिस पे मेल कर दें। तो एक तरीका ये है। दूसरा तरीका ये है कि you have different types of payment methods in पाकिस्तान। पाकिस्तान में लोगों के पास इजी पैसा है जी, मोबाइल में जैज़ कैश है, आजकल यू पैसा है, इसके अलावा आपकी इलेक्ट्रॉनिक बैंकिंग है। ठीक है, ये सारे मेथड्स हैं जिनके ज़रिए लोग आपको पैसे ट्रांसफ़र कर सकते हैं। ठीक है। अच्छा, आप मुझे बताएं, आप लोग स्टूडेंट्स हैं, आप लोग भी ऐसी फैसिलिटीज़ यूज़ करते हैं और क्या क्या ऑप्शंस हैं इलेक्ट्रॉनिकली पैसा ट्रांसफ़र करने की पाकिस्तान में?
तो यानी कि जो अगर मैं कोई चीज़ परचेज कर रहा हूँ तो मुझसे यानी कि उधर ही ये पहले हम पेमेंट करते हैं, फिर जो है ना वो हमें कोई चीज़ सेंड करते हैं बैंक के थ्रू।
ठीक है, ओके। अच्छा ये बताएं, जब आप उबर या करीम इस्तेमाल करते हैं तो क्या मेथड्स
यस
ऑफ
सर।
पेमेंट्स अवेलेबल होते हैं आपके पास?
सर उसमें जो है मोबी कैश के थ्रू भी यानी कि उनका ऑप्शन है आई थिंक, और वैसे भी अगर हम वॉलेट में अगर पैसे रखते हैं तो तब भी यानी कि हम उनको पे कर
कैश पे
सकते
कर
हैं।
सकते हैं, ठीक है। कैश इज ऑफ
यस सर।
कोर्स लिक्विड, ठीक है ना। उसमें तो आप कैश पेमेंट में तो बात ही खत्म हो गई रिकवरी की।
करीम करीम वॉलेट सर।
ओके, क्रीम वॉलेट है। यो जी, एनीबॉडी एल्स? इनामुल हक, तुम्हारा क्या ख्याल है बेटा? आप बता सकते हैं कुछ?
सर जैज कैश के थ्रू भी हम ट्रांसफर कर सकते हैं।
ओके, और कौन सी फैसिलिटीज होती हैं?
सर आपका अपना डेबिट कार्ड जो है, क्रेडिट कार्ड।
एग्जैक्टली, गुड गुड। सो यू हैव योर प्लास्टिक मनी विच इज योर डेबिट कार्ड एंड क्रेडिट कार्ड, उसको भी यूटिलाइज कर सकते हैं आप, ठीक है जी। Okay, so depending upon the nature of the business and depending upon the nature of the transaction, ये activities जो हैं इनको speed up करने के लिए आप ये जो facilities हैं इनको भी business का हिस्सा बना सकते हैं। But again, देखें, अक्सर businesses पाकिस्तान में स्पेशली कैश एंड कैरी जो है वो क्रेडिट कार्ड नहीं यूज़ करते। उसकी एक खास रीज़न है, बिकॉज 3% बैंक उसमें से डिडक्ट करता है, और अगर वो 3% जो है चार्जेस वो कस्टमर नहीं पे कर रहा तो वो फैसिलिटी भी नहीं प्रोवाइड करेंगे। हाँ, अगर बैंक के साथ उनकी नेगोशिएशन है और बैंक उनके लिए वो चार्जेस कम कर देता है, उसमें कुछ कंसेशन कर देता है, तो अगेन वो फैसिलिटी आपको प्रोवाइड करते हैं। अगेन वो क्रेडिट कार्ड यूज़ करने से मुराद ये है कि कस्टमर राइट अवे पैसे नहीं पे करेगा, वो ट्रांजेक्शन हो जाएगी, वो पैसे बैंक के पास होंगे, बैंक जो है वो क्लियरिंग में डालेगा उनको, उस क्लियरिंग फ्लोट के क्लियर होने के बाद जो है वो पैसे जो है उस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को मिलेंगे। तो वो स्पीड अप रिकवरी एक नहीं है कैश की, लेकिन वो इसलिए ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस करती हैं कि उससे आपकी कैश सेल्स जो हैं वो कम नहीं होती, कि लोग वो भी आपके पास आते हैं जो कि कैश पे नहीं आपसे परचेज करना चाहते, तो आपकी कस्टमर का नंबर ऑफ कस्टमर जो है वो रिड्यूस नहीं होता। ओके, सो
सर
थोड़ा
इसमें
सा
डेबिट कार्ड आ सकता है?
डेबिट कार्ड का इशू ये है कि व्हेन यू यूज़ अ डेबिट कार्ड तो जो कैश है वो इलेक्ट्रॉनिकली आपके अकाउंट से ट्रांसफ़र हो जाता है फ़ौरन उस बिज़नेस के अकाउंट में। तो क्रेडिट कार्ड में थोड़ा फ्लोटिंग टाइम होता है, क्लियरेंस का टाइम होता है, लेकिन डेबिट कार्ड में नहीं होता, ठीक है। डेबिट कार्ड इज़ जस्ट लाइक पेइंग बाय कैश। आपके पास कैश नहीं है तो आप प्लास्टिक मनी से कार्ड यूज़ करके पे कर रहे हैं। और
ओके सर।
इससे भी जो ज़्यादा, फॉर एग्ज़ाम्पल जो ज़्यादातर बिज़नेसेस में, बड़े बिज़नेसेस में होता है वो होता है चेक। अगर आप चेक लिख के किसी को देते हैं तो वो बहुत ज़्यादा टाइम लेता है। जैसे नंबर वन, एक तो चेक की मैच्योरिटी डेट है, उसके बाद अगर किसी और बैंक का चेक है तो वो क्लियरेंस में जाएगा, उसकी ट्रांजैक्शन का रिकॉर्ड स्टेट बैंक में जाएगा, फिर वहाँ से क्लियर होगा तो जो जिस बैंक का चेक है वो क्लियर करेगा, उसकी क्लियरेंस के बाद वो पैसा वायर ट्रांसफ़र होगा उस बैंक के अकाउंट में जिस बैंक ने उसको क्लियर क्लियर करवाया है। वो बैंक अपने अकाउंट से फिर उस कस्टमर के अकाउंट में ट्रांसफ़र करेगा जिस कस्टमर का ये पैसा था। तो चेक में इससे ज़्यादा फ्लो टाइम लगता है। तो ये डिपेंडिंग अपॉन कि कौन सी ट्रांजैक्शंस हैं, आप डिफरेंट काइंड ऑफ मेथड्स जो है पेमेंट के वो यूज़ कर सकते हैं। अब इजी पैसा जो है ये टेलीनॉर की क्योंकि सर्विस है, तो एक सर्विस चलाने के लिए उसको प्रॉफिटेबल रखना बहुत ज़रूरी होता है। तो टेलीनॉर की ऑफ कोर्स ये कोशिश होगी हमारे कस्टमर ज़्यादा हों, ज़्यादा लोग ये सर्विस इस्तेमाल करें। तो अगर आप एज अ बिजनेस उसको यूटिलाइज करना चाहते हैं तो यू कैन हैव अ गुड जॉइंट वेंचर और नेगोशिएशन अ कॉन्ट्रैक्ट विद टेलीनॉर। दे विल हेल्प यू आउट, आपको उस सिस्टम को इस्टेब्लिश करने में भी और उस फैसिलिटी को यूज़ करने में भी। फिर ये भी हो सकता है कि आपके कस्टमर्स को वो उस पर कुछ डिस्काउंट या कुछ अट्रैक्टिव ऑप्शंस जो हैं वो ऑफर करें ताकि उसकी यूटिलिटी जो है वो बढ़ाई जा सके और आपकी जो पेमेंट की प्रोसेसिंग है उसको अच्छा बनाया जा सके। तो ये सारी चीज़ें जो है ये इस्तेमाल हो सकती हैं, ठीक है जी। एनी अदर क्वेश्चन? सो आगे कुछ हमारी बैंकिंग के रिलेटेड सर्विसेज हैं, जैसे डिपॉजिटरी ट्रांसफर चेक है या फिर वायर ट्रांसफ़र है, ऑटोमेटिक क्लियरिंग है। तो ये कंट्री टू कंट्री चेंज करती है क्योंकि बैंकिंग सिस्टम हर कंट्री का सिमिलर नहीं, एक जैसा नहीं, आइडेंटिकल नहीं। तो इसमें मैंने पहले भी आपसे एक बात की थी कि हम क्लास में कुछ ग्रुप्स बनाएंगे जिसमें हमें बैंकिंग के हवाले से भी कुछ वेबिनार्स जो हैं वो कंडक्ट करने हैं। तो आई वुड रादर सजेस्ट कि जो भी ग्रुप किसी बैंक के थ्रू कोई सेमिनार या वेबिनार कंडक्ट करवाएगा, इट शुड बी अ पार्ट ऑफ दैट कि उनके हम जो क्लियरिंग सर्विसेज हैं या फिर कैश मैनेजमेंट सर्विसेज हैं बैंक की, उनको हम इंट्रोड्यूस करवाएं उसमें कि वो कौन कौन सी है, वायर ट्रांसफ़र हो सकता है नहीं हो सकता, इलेक्ट्रॉनिक ट्रांसफ़र की कौन कौन से सिस्टम्स हैं, क्लियरिंग हाउस उनका कैसे काम करता है, कितना टाइम लगता है उसमें, और ऑफ कोर्स अगर वो स्टेट बैंक के साथ अटैच्ड है तो उसकी प्रोसेसिंग कैसे होती है। तो ये सारी चीज़ें वहाँ पे फिर उसके साथ हम स्टडी करेंगे। ओके, तो ये अकाउंट रिसीवेबल्स के हवाले से सारी डिस्कशन की हमने। अब जो जूम का हमारा माशाल्लाह 40 मिनट का सेशन है वो ख़त्म होने जा रहा है, तो जो नया लिंक मैं भेजूंगा उसके साथ फिर हम अपनी पेमेंट्स पे डिस्कशन स्टार्ट करेंगे कि अपनी पेमेंट्स को कैसे स्लो डाउन किया जा सकता है। ओके गाइस,
ओके
Okay,
so
sir.
right now there are 27 students present. I will not turn off this automatically, ये खुद ब खुद हो जाएगा। इसमें आई डोंट नो अगर रागीब प्रेजेंट है या नहीं। रागीब, कुड यू प्लीज नोट कि कौन कौन आज है हमारे साथ?
जी सर, मैं नोट करता हूँ।
हाँ प्लीज नोट कर लें।
जी सर।
26 participants including myself, which means 25 students are attending the class right now. और जनाब क्या हाल है?
और जनाब कैसे हैं?
यार बस क्लास ले रहे हैं, दफ्तर में बैठ के रोला डाला हुआ है हमने। वालेकुम सलाम, क्या हाल है? खैरियत से? सही बात है, जुकाम हुआ है, गला जो है ना वो बिल्कुल साथ नहीं दे रहा।